And the protocol explicitly warns that instead of a glossy, beautiful coat, you will end up serving the examiner a watery soup.
Yuck. Nobody wants watery carrot soup.
Definitely not. That raincoat analogy is an excellent way to conceptualize the hydrophobic nature of fat. You require a relatively dry, warm surface for the butterfat to successfully cling and create an even microscopic coating.
Okay, so they're dry.
Yes. Which brings us to the second B, butter. You place exactly 1 teaspoon of butter into a small pan. But the thermal management here is highly precarious. The instruction emphasizes melting the butter strictly on low heat.
So let's talk about why that is, because butter seems so simple, right? But it burns incredibly fast. What is actually happening chemically when butter turns brown and starts smoking?
Right, so butter is an emulsion of butterfat, water, and milk proteins, specifically whey and casein. When you expose butter to high heat, the water evaporates very quickly. Once the water is gone, the temperature of the remaining fat skyrockets, and those delicate milk proteins begin to cook.
Oh, right.
Initially, this creates a brown butter, which is, a desirable Maillard reaction in some contexts. But in a fraction of a second, if that heat is too high, those proteins toast and then scorch, turning dark brown or black.
Now, that smells terrible.
It does. This rapid carbonization releases extremely harsh, acrid, bitter compounds. And in a one-serving dish, a bitter, burnt note cannot be diluted or hidden. It will completely dominate the entire plate. So the protocol specifically wants the butter to act as a shine button, a gentle, golden, glossy puddle.
The shine button, I love the terminology. Okay, so the pan is on low, the butter is a safe, shiny puddle, and we hit the T. Toss. We gently introduce our well-drained, perfectly cubed carrots and corn. We toss them. And the instruction is to do this gently, right? Do not crush the structural integrity you just built, giving them a light, even butter jacket. And then we arrive at the final T, taste, which is really a proxy for precision seasoning.
And the margin for error here is almost microscopic. We are talking about a tiny pinch of salt, a tiny pinch of white pepper, and an optional tiny pinch of sugar. The guide beautifully describes the seasoning phase as sprinkling a tiny pinch of kitchen snow.
Okay, I have to stop you there and ask about that pinch of sugar. Because when I read that, my brain immediately balked. Are we making a candied vegetable here? Like, are we making a dessert? Why on earth are we adding processed sugar to a savory vegetable side dish in a professional assessment?
I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive, but it actually shows a profound understanding of sensory science. Yeah, the protocol explicitly clarifies that the sugar is not there to make the dish taste sweet on the front of the palate. Instead, it is acting as a chemical flavor amplifier.
A flavor amplifier.
Exactly. Both carrots and corn contain natural complex sugars. By adding just a microscopic, almost imperceptible dusting of simple sugar, you trigger the sweet receptors on the human tongue just enough to make them highly receptive to the inherent natural sweetness of the vegetable itself.
Wow.
It forces your brain to pay attention to the carrot's own flavor profile. It highlights the entire philosophy of this specific dish. You are not trying to mask the ingredients with heavy, complex sauces. You are using precise chemical triggers to amplify what the ingredient already is.
That is just wild. It's literally hacking the examiner's taste buds.
It really is.
So what does this all mean for the candidate? It means that a simple, boring side dish of carrots and corn is actually a terrifying tightrope walk of physics, heat transfer, and sensory chemistry. And to make sure you don't fall off that tightrope, the protocol gives you a final memorization chant. You are instructed to literally say this in your head, or even mutter it under your breath, before you ever pick up the knife. The chant is, carrot first, corn last, drain it dry, butter fast.
It relies entirely on cadence and rhythm. It is quite literally a nursery rhyme designed for psychological survival.
Carrot first, corn last, drain it dry, butter fast. It's brilliant in its simplicity. Okay, so we've survived the basic vegetable prep. We proved we can manipulate a knife without losing a finger. We understand the cellular structure of a carrot, and we respect the delicate thermal window of butter.
Right, stage 1 complete.
But now the assessment escalates. Once the examiner sees you can control your own physical movements, they introduce external volatility. We are transitioning from harmless, colorful vegetables to the dangerous realm of raw meat, potential biological contamination, and bubbling vats of hot oil.
Yes, we are moving to the chicken lollipop task, which utilizes 2 whole chicken drumsticks. And you are exactly right. The environmental jeopardy scales up dramatically here.
Big time.
With vegetables, the worst-case scenario is generally, a mushy, unattractive plate that gets you a failing grade. With raw chicken, a mistake in temperature control isn't just a poor grade, it is an active biological safety hazard that can cause severe foodborne illness.
Right, you can literally poison the judge. And the guide makes this imperative incredibly clear from the very first sentence of this section. The internal temperature of the chicken must reach exactly 165 degrees Fahrenheit or 74 degrees Celsius at the absolute thickest part of the meat near the bone.
Yes.
That is the non-negotiable biological finish line. And the cognitive code to get us safely across that finish line is a 5-letter acronym, CSCFS cut, season, coat, fry, sauce.
So let's begin with the C-cut, or more accurately, the mechanical engineering process known as Frenching.
Frenching, right.
The protocol demands that the candidate physically transform a standard tapered chicken drumstick into a neat, dense, spherical lollipop.
This was easily the most fascinating and kind of bizarre part of the document for me. The instructions tell the candidate to find the thin bone and, the knobby part you usually hold with your fingers, and make what it calls a belt cut, about 1 inch down from the end. You take your knife and cut a ring completely around the bone, slicing through the skin and the thick tendons.
But the warning here is stark. Cut around the bone, do not attempt to cut through the bone.
Right, because if you apply too much pressure and chop into the bone itself, you create microscopic bone splinters.
And those splinters become a massive physical liability when the examiner eats the dish. You are merely scoring the connective tissue. Once that belt cut is made, the guide describes a very specific physical action. You scrape and loosen the meat, forcibly pushing it downward toward the fat end of the drumstick.
Wait, scraping the meat off the bone? Doesn't that just destroy the texture of the chicken? It sounds like you were just mangling it. I mean, if you're sliding the meat down, as the guide says, like sliding a sleeve down an arm, isn't that just for presentation? What is the actual point of turning a drumstick into a lollipop besides making it look fancy for a banquet?
It absolutely looks like a purely aesthetic choice at first glance, but there are profound thermodynamic and mechanical benefits to this technique that are critical for an assessment.
Okay, but lay them on me.
First, practically, it creates a perfectly clean bone handle. In an assessment, clean eating meaning allowing the judge to hold the item without getting grease all over their hands is heavily weighted.
Ah, I didn't think of that.
The second, and far more importantly for the science of cooking, by pushing all that scattered meat down, you gather it into a uniform, highly dense sphere.
A meatball on a stick.
Exactly. And this completely changes how thermal energy penetrates the meat when it eventually hits the boiling oil. Well, a natural drumstick is tapered, right? It is thin at the top and thick at the bottom. This means the thin part overcooks and dries out before the thick part reaches a safe temperature. By creating a dense sphere, you promote entirely even heat distribution.
Okay, that makes total sense.
And finally, as you push that meat down, you will expose thick, white, rubbery tendons. The protocol notes you must physically sever those with your knife. If you do not cut those tendons, the meat remains physically tethered to the top of the bone. When it cooks and the muscle fibers contract, the meat will rip itself apart. You are essentially dismantling the chicken's natural anatomy and re-engineering it to serve your specific thermodynamic needs.
Okay, when you explain the heat distribution, that makes total sense. Form completely follows function here. So we have our two perfectly engineered uniform lollipops. Now we hit the S season. We place them in a marinade consisting of soy sauce, calamansi juice, minced garlic, salt, pepper, and maybe a pinch of paprika. And for anyone listening globally who might not know, calamansi is a highly acidic citrus fruit native to the Philippines, sort of a hybrid flavor between a lime and a mandarin orange. It provides a massive hit of acids.
A really bright, sharp acid, yeah.
The instruction says to massage this marinade into the meat and let it rest for exactly 10 to 15 minutes.
And here, again, we encounter the terrifying danger of the single serving constraint. The guide issues an explicit highlighted note regarding the seasoning. Do not add too much soy sauce or salt.
Right, because when you're marinating exactly 2 individual pieces of chicken,
Yeah.
a heavy hand with the salt shaker doesn't just season the meat, it chemically cures it.
Exactly. If you are making a massive tray of chicken for a family barbecue and you spill a little extra salt, it dissipates across the volume. But here, you are locked in. The sodium concentration will turn those 2 tiny lollipops into an inedible salt lick, and you cannot dilute it.
So you respect the measurements, the 15 minutes are up, and the chicken has absorbed the acid and salt. Now we face the C coat, and the guide mandates setting up 3 distinct bowls in a row on your workstation. It refers to them as the 3 gates.
This is a highly formalized standard breading procedure, but the way it is codified here is an excellent study in moisture management.
The 3 gates.
Yes. The first gate is the powder gate, a
Hmm.
dry mixture of 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, plus a tiny pinch of salt and pepper. The text notes the cornstarch is critical here to make the final protective shell lighter and crispier.
Good tip.
The second gate is the sticky gate, 1 single thoroughly beaten egg, and the final gate is the crunchy gate, 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of dry breadcrumbs.
The powder gate, the sticky gate, the crunchy gate. Flour, egg crumbs. I was trying to picture the actual science happening here at a microscopic level, and the guide just spells it out beautifully. Flour dries, egg glues, crumbs crisp. It is literally an architectural layering process. You are building a protective house around this biological core.
It is entirely architectural, relying heavily on managing moisture barriers.
And think about what happens if you mess up the foundation of that house. The guide states that before you ever place the marinated chicken into the flour, you must hold it up and let the excess liquid marinade completely drip off. Because if you drop soaking wet chicken just dripping with soy sauce and calamansi juice into the flour, what happens?
You trigger an immediate structural failure.
Right, that first protective layer, the dry flour, absorbs massive amounts of liquid and immediately turns into a thick, heavy, clumpy paste. The foundation crumbles.
Yes, and because the flour is now a wet paste, the liquid egg in the second gate has no dry, porous surface to latch onto. It just slides right off.
Which means the breadcrumbs have no glue.
Exactly. The entire architectural house slides off the chicken and falls apart the moment it hits the hot oil.
It's a disaster.
It's a very precise description of failure at the breading station. The moisture gradients must be strictly respected. The flour's entire job is to absorb just enough surface moisture to create a dry, microscopic roughness. That rough texture allows the complex proteins in the beaten egg to latch on and coagulate, which in turn acts as the powerful adhesive for the structural outer layer of the breadcrumbs. And the protocol notes you have to press the crumbs on gently so they embed into the egg glue, but not so hard that you flatten the beautiful, dense, spherical shape you just spent so much time engineering.
You need a delicate balance of force. So now we have our structurally sound, perfectly breaded lollipops. We move to the F-fry. This is where the environmental danger peaks. You are standing over a pot of hot oil. The guide dictates medium heat, and it provides another brilliant cognitive-saving visual cue to gauge the exact thermal state of the oil before you ever risk dropping the chicken in. It tells you to test the oil by dropping in a single breadcrumb.
Yes. The text differentiates between what it calls steady bubbles and angry bubbles.
I just love that phrase, angry bubbles. Let's break down what is actually happening when a breadcrumb hits oil.
Well, when you drop organic matter into hot oil, you are not actually boiling it in oil. Frying is a violent dehydration process. The heat of the oil instantly vaporizes the moisture on the surface of the food.
Okay.
That moisture turns into steam and forces its way out, which is what creates the bubbles you see. If you drop a crumb in and the oil violently erupts with angry, chaotic bubbles, and the crumb instantly carbonizes and turns dark black, the kinetic energy of the oil is far too high.
Way too hot.
Right. But if the crumb simply sinks to the bottom and does nothing, the thermal energy is too low.
Yeah.
Without that outward pressure of escaping steam, the porous breadcrumb shell will just absorb the lukewarm oil like a sponge, resulting in a greasy, soggy mess. You are looking for a steady, shimmering reaction, a controlled release of steam.
Medium heat, steady bubbles. And finding this exact middle ground is vital because of what I like to call the great deception of the drumstick.
Ah, yes.
The guide highlights a massive assessment warning here. A golden outside does not always mean a cooked inside.
This is the absolute most common failure point for candidates frying bone-in poultry.
I believe it.
The breadcrumb coating, because of the direct contact with the oil, will rapidly undergo the Maillard reaction, turning a beautiful deep golden brown in about 4 or 5 minutes. To the human eye, it will look entirely perfectly done. But deep inside that dense ball of engineered meat, right up against the thick bone, the temperature is lagging dangerously behind.
It's hiding raw, bloody meat right where the judge is going to take a bite.
Precisely. The thick bone acts as a powerful thermal insulator, actively resisting the transfer of heat.